Welcome back to Her Birth, Her Story, where we share real birth experiences. I'm Brooke, your host, and on today's episode, I'm sitting down with Katie, who is a mom of 3, and she's going to take us through her 3 home birthing experiences. We do talk a little bit about miscarriage. We definitely don't go into any intense detail or anything like that. But if you are triggered by talking about miscarriage, make sure that you fast forward. But during this conversation, we get into a lot of the preparation. We even talk about what it looks like to have a faith-filled birth and how important it is to just surrender. And she is a perfect example when you look at all 3 of her births that every single birth is different. Time-wise is different. Sometimes there can be patterns that are very much the same, but we talk about what a fetal ejection reflex is like. We even talk about overcoming and walking through postpartum depression and trying to eliminate the stigma that comes with that. So please, if you are somebody who is experiencing postpartum depression, please find someone who can help you, get you resources. You are not alone. It is not something that you should be ashamed of. Instead, you should find somebody to help you work through it because you are not alone and it is very real. Find those trusted people that can help you, and just know whether you are going through the postpartum depression or not, it is never wrong and it is never weak of you, and it doesn't make you a bad mother if you want to ask for help. If you need help, ask for help. So I'm so excited to sit down with Katie. So let's hold space for Katie and her stories. Hey, Katie, thank you so much for coming on Her Birth, Her Story. Can you go ahead and just start by kind of telling us your views or how you looked at pregnancy and birth before becoming pregnant yourself?
I think that there's so much more about birth and pregnancy and postpartum than people realize. I feel like a lot of women, get pregnant and really all they know is my goal is to have this baby, but they don't think about, what's going to happen after. How do I want to handle the immediate after having the baby? How am I going to handle pregnancy and the potential things that could come up there? So that was something, especially with my first, diving into it, that I was like, I want to know, because this is a huge thing. Pregnancy is not something that is little. And so I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to know everything I can so that I can have the best birth experience possible.
Yeah, and I really like that you touch on that too, because I think that's always my biggest ick when it comes to pregnancy and birth is a lot of times it's just treated as another medical event or just just something. And yes, obviously we are created to also, bear children and stuff too. And I obviously agree with that, but it is something that you only get to do so many times. And it is a big life-changing event that you should prepare for before, during, and after, because bounce back culture, everybody always wants to be who they were before they have children. And even though I personally think that you can obviously take care of yourself and do all of that, but you're never going to be the person that you were before, because especially when it's your first, because guess what? You are now born a mother. There should not be pressure that you ever have to fit in your pre-pregnancy genes if
Absolutely.
especially when it's your first, because you just went from just being a girl, kind of a woman, to then bearing children. Now you are a woman. So, you know what I mean?
It's a really transformative experience. There with you. I'm right there with you.
Yes. And so honestly, right now, I am just going to go ahead and have you tell your first birth story uninterrupted. And if there's any background or anything that we need to know that kind of sets the story up, then make sure that you share that first.
Yeah, absolutely. I had some experience, I guess, with miscarriage or knowing about it because my mom had miscarriages. And I had heard about it. I feel like it was not a taboo subject in my house. And so I got pregnant with my first, and actually my first, we didn't even realize we were pregnant until I had gotten blood work done, and they happened to tell me. But that was still very hard for me, because at that point we were wanting to try, and, my period was late and all the things, but we just never got a positive. And then that was 2 months later after that, I got pregnant again. And at that point, that was when I was like, okay, I know for sure that I want to do home birth. My husband was still kind of on edge. Not that he was against it, he just didn't know enough. But I had a friend who was also doing home birth, and she recommended her midwife to me. And so I had reached out to her, and we had scheduled like the intake interview and everything. And then like 2 days before that, I had miscarried. And so I had texted her, and I just messaged her and I was like, hey, unfortunately, I won't need you right now. And actually, the reason I chose her was because she texted me back and asked if she could call me and pray for me and just like tell me like if I had to go to the hospital, or like what they would do, go get some blood work to see HCG levels. So I was like, okay, I know for sure that like going forward, this is who I want, and I'm very open about my miscarriages because I know how isolating it was for me in that experience. I'm so grateful that like I had my mom who understood. First off, I think it's really important for moms to know that like no matter how early or how late your loss, like your loss is still a loss and your baby was still your baby. And because I did have like an OB tell me, well, it wasn't a real pregnancy, it was just, whatever. And I'm like, no, like you can feel when that life has left. And so that's very important for me, for women to know like it's okay to like feel that grief. Like our losses were early, and we actually prayed about like what the Lord named our babies. And so they have names. And my necklace has the birthstones of when we lost them on there. Yeah, I mean, as far as miscarriage goes, I just think it's important, like, for people to know it's so common. It's so, so common. And I think so many women feel like they have to hide it because they think they did something wrong, and unfortunately things just don't always work out in your body. But I think it's also important for women to know, like, your baby's still your baby, and you can name them if you want to, but you should definitely remember them, because it's losing that life is still terribly, terribly difficult. So that was like leading up to getting pregnant with my first Earthside. And at that point, like I said, I knew I wanted my midwife to be who she was. And when I say that his pregnancy was the most difficult thing I've ever gone through, it was right on the end of COVID. And I had actually just gotten COVID. I had lost my sense of smell and got it back right before getting pregnant. And so, you already have super increased senses when you're pregnant, and then top that on like just completely regaining smell. So everything smelled horrible to me. I didn't have morning sickness. I had all the time sickness.
Ugh.
And like, I mean, I couldn't go in grocery stores. I couldn't go to restaurants. Everything made me sick. I couldn't eat meat. So I really, really like, thank God for my midwife and helping me with the nutritional aspect, because I struggled big time with him. Even things like I had thrown up so much that I got pleuritis, which is inflammation of the chest wall. Like it was nuts. And it wasn't like, the second trimester things get better. No, it was the entire pregnancy. And what was wild was as soon as I gave birth to him, everything went back to normal. Everything tasted normal. Everything smelled normal. So all through his pregnancy, I really focused on just learning about birth, both from a like physiological perspective, but also from like a spiritual perspective, how God made my body to birth. And people always talk about like birth is like a marathon, and it doesn't make any sense to just wake up and run a marathon one day. Like you really need to do that preparation. And I'm so glad I did. And I read a book by Nissa Andrews called Pain-Free Childbirth. And she kind of talked about she made it sound like pain-free childbirth is actually completely pain-free, which I'll get into in a minute. But she talked about just the fact that like I said, there was birth before the fall, before pain entered the world, before sin entered the world. And so there is that possibility of experiencing that without pain, without fear, and all those things. And I was like, that is my goal. I want to just be totally surrendered to the Lord in my birth. I want to be at peace with how God made me, and what God made me to do. Fast forward to my actual due date. He was born right at 40 weeks. I was at home with my husband, and I remembered feeling contractions and kind of questioning, because everybody tells you like, you'll know when you know, but like, I didn't know. And so I was timing them in my head, and they were like every 20 minutes apart, and I'm kind of questioning, if things are going the way that I think they are or not. And so finally, after about an hour of that, I asked my husband to go on a walk, and I was like, I think I'm in labor. Like, I just want to let you know. And he was really chill about it. And so we just went on a walk, and then it was like 9 p.m. So I was like, let's just go to bed. I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I just want to go to bed and relax, get as much rest as I can, because I knew that I probably had a long road ahead of me. So at around 1:30 in the morning, I started having contractions strong enough that I could not sleep. And like I could still talk through them and all the things, but there was no rest at that point. And so we decided to play board games at 1 a.m. and just, make the most of it. And from about 1 to, I want to say 6 a.m., I was having contractions every 4 to 6 minutes apart. And so at that point, I figured that I should reach out to my midwife because that was kind of the timeline that she said. Well, it turned out that my baby, who was in the perfect position at the midwife appointment the day before, had become sunny side up. And so my body those contractions were like tripling and trying to get him to move. So she came in the morning and, confirmed, yes, he is in the wrong position, and had me do spinning babies, which I don't know if you've ever had to do spinning babies during labor, but it is terrible. It worked, and thank God it worked, but it was rough. And so at that point, I had been in labor for over 12 hours. I was exhausted and I couldn't keep anything down. And so by the grace of God, my contractions slowed down to every 20 minutes apart again, and I was able to get some rest. My midwife had left at that point. We really were just kind of taking things in stride. And then around 3 p.m., so we're going on almost 24 hours at this point, I was like just completely wiped out, utterly exhausted. And we had planned to have a water birth, but I knew that if you got into water too early, that could stall your labor. So I reached out to my midwife and I was like, can I at least get in the bath, or the shower or something? So she told me I could get in the bath. And as soon as I got in the bath, my labor jumped into active labor. It was immediate. And so she had told my husband, wait till she's kind of in labor land and then you can call me, labor land where she's not really talking. She's just focusing on her contractions, all those things. Well, I never went there. And so he called my midwife, kind of unsure about whether or not she should come, because at that point my contractions were real close together. But I wasn't I don't want to say disassociating, but I wasn't really focusing inward at that point the way that they expected me to. And so she showed up and she and her assistant brought us sushi, which was funny, was really great about being hands off. That was something that was really important to me, letting me birth pretty much completely hands-free unless I needed help. And so she'd come in and she'd check on baby every once in a while, but for the most part, she left us in our room and they hung out in the living room. So that went on for a little while, and then kind of out of nowhere, I started feeling really pushy and called her in and told her I really feel like I have to push, but I still hadn't entered the labor land that she expected. So she was like, you probably still have a ways to go. Why don't you go labor on the toilet? And I'm like, no, I feel like I have to push. And so I went to the toilet, and as soon as I sat down, my water broke, almost instantly. And so she says, I'm going to check. I'm going to see if I can see anything. And lo and behold, there was his head. Thankfully, we had the pool set up at that point, which was a whole mess of itself because we didn't have the right connection for the sink. So we had to duct tape the hose to the sink. Man. But we made it work. And so she walked me over to the pool, and I had fetal ejection reflex with my first so fast that I actually had to go to the hospital to get stitches because I had such a bad tear, which was a little bit rough. Yeah, he was only 5 pounds, 12 ounces. So it was just little baby came out really fast. But there wasn't even there was no crowning, nothing like that. He was in and then he was out. But I got to catch him, which was really cool, and bring him to my chest myself. And then I birthed my placenta in the pool. And they, after that, transferred me out, and we actually sat on the couch for a little bit. And I laugh because I feel like, birth can be funny, and it was. We had the placenta in a baggie, and when I got up to go to my bed, the placenta actually had fallen in between the couch cushions. So I'm like, that would happen to me. So yeah, it was 26 hours of just back and forth of rest, and then I'm moving, and I almost had to go to the hospital because I was so clinically exhausted, couldn't keep food down. And so that was just a super wild experience. And then on top of that, having to leave my baby with my husband immediately after to go get stitches, it was a wild ride. And with my first, I did experience postpartum depression almost. I feel like I disassociated almost immediately after putting him on my chest. And so that was really tough. That was, I think, a year-long season of really, really struggling, in the depths of postpartum depression. But that got resolved. I wouldn't say completely, but got better when I had my second. So that, we can dive into that a little bit later too. But I would say, as far as the pain-free birth goes, I remember after I had him, just being so exhausted, looking at my husband and saying so much for a pain-free birth, because at the time, again, in my head, I was like, pain-free means no struggle, which really my mindset shifted when I had my second. And I would, looking back on it, say there was definitely pressure, but it was it was productive, and I wouldn't say that it was pain in the way that we think of pain, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was really, that kind of shaped how I entered into my second birth, and my third.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you, since you mentioned that you experienced that fetal ejection reflex. Honestly, not a lot of people actually get to experience that, or sometimes people don't really realize that they are experiencing it when it does happen, because it's not really talked about a lot, at least in some pockets of the birth world. But what was that experience like, and how did it impact your view of your future births?
It was wild because, like, I felt my body needing to push and to bear down. Like, I had no control. It was just my body doing its thing. And, like, I will say I definitely panicked with him, with my first, because it was, like, so fast out of nowhere. But I really didn't have any control. It was wild. Like, my body was physically pushing me down to try and get him out. And then when we were in the pool, I was on my hands and knees. And I remember my midwife telling me to try and slow down, and I was like, I have no control over this. I cannot. Like, there is no stopping this child from coming out. And so it was, like, just shocking at how quickly, because, you know, you think of what you hear usually is, oh, the baby's going to crown, and then you're going to have another contraction, and then the shoulders will come out. I'm like, no, that's not at all what happened. And so that actually, my body only pushed for, she said, 26 minutes, I think, which time is just not a thing in labor. But as far as my other births go, it kind of made me, like, look forward to it more, because I was like, okay, my body already knows what it's doing. I don't have to work that hard. Like, and if it did it for my first, then I'm likely going to be able to have that for my others. So it was exciting, I guess, to me in some way.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. I definitely can relate, I experienced it with my first too, but it freaked me out to where I was like, why? What is happening? I even asked my doula too. I was like, is that normal? Like, my body just was pushing itself as I was, like, kind
Yeah.
of like grunting like a little bit. And I was like, what was that noise that just came out of me, for one? And two, like, is that okay that that just happened?
Right.
It freaks me out. And so with that one, I didn't get to experience it to its full, because I
Sure.
was basically told to push because I was ready and I was experiencing that. But with my second, I definitely experienced it because it was such a fast and furious home birth that my midwife didn't even make it, because my birth was an hour and 18 minutes from first
my gosh.
contraction to birthing him. And that, I don't even remember if I even obviously I had the fetal ejection reflex, because how else is he coming out? But
Right.
I don't know. I just think that the fetal ejection reflex is one of the coolest things that
Yeah.
God has designed our bodies to do when you let a birth. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
it's just, like, so cool. And I'm glad that you got to experience that. And I just think it's very relatable that when you experience it with your first, you just, even if you've read about it and you're like, oh, I know that this is what it is, it still, like, takes you back a little bit, because, like,
Yeah.
you can't control it. You can't stop it. It just is happening.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so I just think that's cool that then that kind of built up to help you, if you experience that with your second and your third, to just understand, like, wow, like, God's design is amazing. Like, how awesome is that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I 100% can say that I was the strongest and, like, grew the most in my faith through my first pregnancy and birth, because just, like, really understanding, like, the intricacy in which God designed me, and, like, my ability to birth a human and to grow a human. Like, how wild is that? That he made us so perfectly in order to do all those things. And so, I mean, especially after a rough labor and a rough pregnancy, like, having that fetal ejection reflex, I almost feel like was like a reminder of, like, listen, like, you were made to do this. I know it was really, really tough, but, like, you were made to do it. So it was really a neat experience with my first.
I like that you spoke to that. When people hear pain free, they automatically think, like, you don't feel anything. It's all rainbows and sunshines and there's nothing hard. And I think that it's just important for people to know, like, it's different.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, especially after having my second and my third, like, it's been really evident to me, just, like, I think about the suffering and everything that, like, Christ went through in order for us to have life, and it's really, I think sometimes a humbling experience to be able to go through even like an ounce of that to bring life into the world, because birth is hard and it is, I think, largely a mental game. But I would say too, like I said, like my births were not painful from a traditional sense, like because I knew that pain had a purpose. I think that had I not
Yes.
known that, that I would have viewed it as pain. But I would say that all of my births were pain free because I knew that my body was working towards something. That's why, like, I see people do the, practice holding ice cubes to help for labor. And I'm like, that just seems kind of silly to me because like even down to a neurological level, your body doesn't understand that that's working towards something. Whereas in labor, like everything is all connected. And so even if you and your emotions start to panic, like your body still knows what it's doing and that's working towards something. So I would say, like, even from the pain-free perspective, for women who expect that, good for them if they don't have to worry about feeling the pressure of the contractions. But I think that we just have to shift the mindset of like, it really isn't pain. It's pressure, it's progress. And I think that it is also, like I said, humbling to be able to endure some of that, like little bit of suffering to bring life into the world. Because I think that really everything on earth, from marriage to birth to all the things, was intended to be an analogy of Christ's relationship with his kids. And so, even things like nursing and like the breakdown of a mom's body in order to sustain. So yeah, I will say my view of pain free definitely shifted from when I read the book to the births itself.
Honestly, if you want, go ahead and just start with your second birth story.
Yeah. So I got pregnant 4 months postpartum, which was not in the plan. I shouldn't say that. I have always had a view of I don't want to limit God and his plans for me and my family. And so we, like, prior to getting married, we had talked about like the different ways of like birth control we wanted to use. I being down the crunchy path, like, and I have chronic migraines and stuff. There's just no way I could do birth control. Plus, I did not want to. And, so we used other forms of protection and that was fine. But then after having Titus, my first, we just really prayed about like, okay, what do we want our family to look like? I know I want to have another one. Like, obviously we're going to get pregnant in God's timing. So I don't really want to limit that. And so we kind of just enjoyed sex the way married couples should, like without fear of getting pregnant or all those things. And so that did lead to us getting pregnant 4 months postpartum. And it was kind of shocking and it was kind of terrifying, but it was also like, I'm so grateful for that timing because, my boys are so close now. And also, like I said, I had really bad postpartum depression with my first, and that was almost completely wiped away when I had my second. And, so I can only imagine if there were a bigger gap, how much longer I would have had to deal with all of that. So with my second, it really like honed in on the nutrition because if you don't know that your liver takes a big hit when you're pregnant. And so my liver was still recovering from my first. And so that actually liver issues can play into things like preeclampsia and stuff like that. And so I had pregnancy induced hypertension. And so that was like a big fear because I was, obviously if the Lord called me to give birth at the hospital or have a C-section and that was his plan, great. But I really wanted to do everything in my power to avoid that. So really big on nutrition and just doing my best to take care of myself because I was so down in the dirt, like with the postpartum depression. And I just hated being there, like I wanted to be the best mom and wife that I could be. And so with my second, he was 3 days past guest date, due dates are a joke anyways.
Yeah, for sure.
And he kind of messed around with me a little bit. Like I had some Braxton Hicks that kind of seemed kind of real, but I wouldn't say it was prodromal labor. And then I went into labor at, I want to say like 11 p.m. And I think I knew that day that I was going to go into labor because I was like, let's just go out as a family one more time. And then we did like a family game night at my mom's and I left Titus there so that he could stay. And I was like, I just have a feeling. And so with that one, I knew I was in labor because my body was just clearing everything out. Like, and I actually thought that I had food poisoning at first. And I told my husband, I'm like, if this is food poisoning, I'm going to be so frustrated because I was ready to have this baby. And for him, his labor from like 11 p.m. to 10 a.m., contractions were 8 to 10 minutes apart the whole time.
Wow.
And it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And I really struggled with that one because like, I was hoping that labor would be shorter and I had worked harder on my body and all the things. And so I really, really had to lean into God on that one, because I'm like, there's no rest, there's no eating, there's no, like, everything that I tried to take in came back out. I could not sustain myself the way that I needed to. I was wiped. And so we did plan to have a water birth for him. And so we like kind of had that stuff set out. But prior to getting that set up, I got in and out of the shower a lot. Like, that was the only pain relief. And God bless my husband. He did counter pressure for all 3 of my kids. And he was a lifesaver for that. But the shower was like the only thing that really helped with those contractions. And so I just remember I was exhausted. My friend was actually there. She was doing birth photos for me. And so it was nice to have some comedic relief. She definitely was a help. But like around 10 a.m., I got back in bed after getting out of the shower for like the 4th time. And I remember just like pleading to God, like, I need you to get this moving, because I'm so tired. I don't want to have to go to the hospital. Like, I know that this baby wants to come. I just need him to come. And I had thought maybe he's in the wrong position or something, because that's how Titus was. So I did the spinning babies. I did all the things, went on walk, everything that they tell you to do. And so I'm laying in bed, like, just feeling super defeated, asking the Lord, like, I need you to move this forward. And I had just like 30 seconds later or earlier gotten out of the shower. And so then I feel the Lord say, you need to get back in the shower. I'm like, I just got out. Like, seriously. So I get in the shower and I let the hot water run down my back for a little bit. And that my husband was resting, because I was like, we're just going at the same pace right now. Just go lay down. Like, it's okay. And as soon as I stepped out of the shower, my contractions jumped from every 8 minutes apart to every 2 minutes apart. And like immediate, like pushing my body down, bearing down, all the things. And so he hears me. Our bathroom was like a Jack and Jill that was connected to our bedroom and then the other bedroom. And he hears me, comes running in. And I was like, I think you need to call Abigail, my midwife. And we had kind of discussed, because of how quickly Titus came, once he got in the right position, we were like, okay, here's what we need to talk about, like, with her coming, because he's going to come fast. But usually they tell you, don't call until you've had contractions every 4 minutes apart for so long. Well, I never had the contractions 4 minutes apart, and I had told her that I was in labor, but I just, at the beginning of labor, I was like, I'm just going to do my thing, And so she like rushed as fast as she could to get there, because contractions had jumped together so quickly. And at that point, my friend who was doing photography asked me if I wanted her to start filling up the pool. And I was like, yeah, like, go ahead. This kid's probably coming soon. Well, my midwife got there and I was in the bathroom, and I was like, I had a little fear of tearing again, just because of how bad I tore the first time.
Yeah.
And so she's, trying to help me change position. And he did not like the position I was in. Like, his heart rate kept dropping. So she's like, you need to come out of the bathroom. There's not enough room in here, like, for us to keep an eye on him. She had to drag me out, because I was like, 2 minutes apart, a minute long. I was not moving at this point. And I'm still like talking to her, like telling her things. And at that point she knew I just don't go into labor land. But this kid just did not want to come out. And so he actually made me push for an hour and a half. I did not have the fetal ejection reflex with him, because he didn't tuck his chin. And so that birth was wild and completely like different from what I expected it to be, because I expected to have another water birth. Well, I didn't even have the pool a quarter of the way filled up by the time he came. And so she pulled me out, and I pushed on my side for a little bit, and we actually pulled the squatty potty out. And with that one, it was kind of neat, because I got to see him crown, which was like a wild experience. And same thing, got to catch him, birth my placenta. And it was kind of crazy how different I felt the minute he came out. Like, because I was so in the trenches with postpartum depression. I mean, if I'm being honest, I really don't remember a whole lot of the first year of my first son's life. Like, and it was like the Lord just lifted that cloud, like, right off of me after having my second. And I had a lot of breastfeeding troubles with my first. We ended up exclusively pumping for 5 months. Like, just a lot. My second just had like the perfect latch, like all the things. It was so redemptive, and everything that I prayed for, because I was like, Lord, I have so many fears walking into this of like, I don't want to have the postpartum depression. I don't want to have the postpartum anxiety. I want to have a redemptive breastfeeding experience. And like with him, the Lord just answered every single one of those prayers. And it was such a blessing, and like such a gift to see him answer those prayers in such a tangible way, because not that my first birth was bad, like, it was a great experience, but this one was so just so like faith filling and uplifting. So that was really great with my second. And that one was only 13 and a half hours. So I cut my labor time in half.
Yeah, no, that's definitely encouraging, especially then like preparing for your third too. So
Yeah.
hopefully they just kept getting shorter, because,
Yeah.
not that there's one birth is better long or short, because I think they both have their own like hardships that you kind of have to overcome and stuff too. But it is just, no matter what, birth is just hard, and long labors too. Just like,
It's just
especially
exhausting.
yes, it is so exhausting, especially for you, like you saying like you can't keep really anything down. That makes it even worse, because if you're like at least able to like hydrate some and then like, eat a little snack just to help kind of get your energy back up. But if you can't do that, you're literally just absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
That's hard. You had talked about a lot how this one was obviously faith filling, and just like how you were able to surrender to God, how you basically really needed to do that. How did surrendering to God during that birth really change your labor experience during this one?
I think I just had to, I think with my first, I didn't fully let go in the way that I needed to. Like, I still in my head thought that I had some sort of control. And like, yes, I could keep myself calm and whatever, but like, I still wanted birth to go a certain way and like control it in my own regard. And with my second, like, with contractions coming so close together for so long and with not getting rest and everything, like, the Lord really broke me down and was like, you have to lean on me through this. Like, I had no choice but to lean on him through it. And, like, I had worship music on and praying and all the things. But I think because the labor was so intense for so long and I couldn't keep anything down, like, the Lord almost forced me to like realize, like, you can't do this alone. Like, you need to listen to me on this. And I have to say, like, that was the clearest that I've ever heard his voice too. Like, when I was just so completely broken down. Um, and I think that, like, that's stuck with me just in life in general, that, like, sometimes the Lord really lets us get down to nothing so that he can let us, like, hear his voice and really realize, like, that we need him. And so I think that, like, yes, I relied on my faith, but also it grew my faith because it was, like, the Holy Spirit was so tangibly there, like, and I could hear his voice and I knew, like, he was guiding me through it. There was nothing that I did in my own power to get through that birth. It was 100% the Lord.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with that too, because it's just so funny, because for my first, that was my Bible verse of the day, was essentially saying like, not by your strength, but by mine.
Yeah.
And I just thought that that was just so, so crazy. Like how that was like, how God just really lined that up for me. So I was like, you know what? And then that was pretty much my thing that I leaned in the most from start to finish was, hey, not by my strength, but by his.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like really hard to actually apply that. It's really easy to hear that and to say, "Oh, that's great advice," but to actually apply it to life is difficult. So, I just think that, like, the breaking down of me through that birth was the Lord saying, like, "Listen, like, you need to actually pay attention to me. Like, I am here."
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And honestly, now I'm just going to have you go ahead and start with your third.
Yeah, so my third was, he's 2 years apart from my middle, and actually he was born the day before my second birthday. And, uh, so he was a faith baby, that's what I call him, because we were living with my parents when we got pregnant, and I just, like, I felt like we needed to have another. It took a lot of praying to convince my husband, but I was like, I just feel like it's time to get pregnant. And it didn't make sense at all, because we were living with my parents and we were trying to save for a house, and my husband was like gunning for a full-time job and all the things. Like, nothing about the timing of it made sense from a like worldly standpoint. And so we were with my parents until I was 36 weeks pregnant, and we bought a house and moved in 36 weeks pregnant, which was a nightmare,
Crazy.
but also great. And this pregnancy had its own challenges. I had, which I've had with each of them, but especially bad with him, pubic symphysis dysfunction, which is basically your pelvis is held, there's like a little bone right in the front of your pelvis that's held together by tendons. And when your body has that relaxin that like makes you loosey-goosey for pregnancy, it can really stretch that. And so it like made it hard to get up. It made it hard to walk. It made it hard to do all the things. And I do like horseback riding. I'm very active. And so not being able to do that and like also having to deal with the pain while handling two toddlers was really tough. So with his, I actually struggled with prenatal depression. And like the Lord has done a lot of breaking down of me to really focus on him.
Yeah.
I tend to be stubborn. And so with Elias, my third, I had prodromal labor for 2 weeks, and it was tough because it wasn't like here and there. It was every time I moved, I got a contraction that felt like active labor. And one of my big concerns about this birth was that my husband's a firefighter. I really Lord, let him be home when I go into labor, because I had a feeling labor would be somewhat fast. And I just also didn't want to have to worry about the logistics of him getting home and getting my kids over to my mom's and all the things. And so we had a couple times where he actually left work or called off because I thought I was in labor. I thought third kid, I'm going to know. But that prodromal labor really made me confused. I was frustrated, and it was so long and so exhausting in its own way. And so 40 weeks, 5 days, my husband actually did go into shift, and he was just working a PM shift. So he was only gone from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. But I had my mom over just because I had, again, a feeling. I was like, I want you here. At this point, we lived 35 minutes from my parents. So we're further than we were when we had my first two. And so I was like, I just want you here just in case. So I got the kids in bed. My husband left for work, and I, was feeling my prodromal labor contractions, and I went to bed. And I, kind of felt them every time I moved, but I realized they were kind of starting to get more consistent, doing the mental timing. At this point, it's 10:30 at night. And I'm just praying, Lord, I need you to tell me if this is real, because I really don't want to have this baby with my kids here and my mom here. I want my husband home. I want all the things. And so thankfully my body started shaking, and I was like, okay, that's a telltale sign for me. I know that this is real. So I called my husband. I'm like, hey, we're having this baby. You need to come home. Contractions are every 10 minutes apart at this point. And I texted my mom because she was sleeping in the living room. And at this point, I just wanted to be in my room by myself. I was like, hey, Seth's coming home. I just want to let you know so you're not freaked out when somebody comes in the door.
Yeah.
And so then very quickly it got to a point where I could not lay down. I've never been one to be able to labor in bed. I have to move all the time. And so I'm walking around the kitchen and all the things, trying to stay quiet. I'm not very vocal till I'm pushing, but also my kids were sleeping. I just didn't want to wake them up, period. And very, very, very quickly, they jumped from 10 minutes to 2 minutes again. There was no active labor. We're just right into transition. And so my husband was still not home, and his station's only 16 minutes from the house. So I'm calling him where are you? Well, in his head, I was still 10 minutes apart when I called him. So he's like, I can, make my bed and say bye to the guys and all the things and then come home. So by the time he gets home, he helps my mom load the kids up. It's midnight. Actually, I think it was 12:30 at that point when he got home. And I'm in the bathroom timing my contractions, and he goes, do you think we should call Abigail? And in my head, I'm like, no, this isn't real labor. I've only been having contractions for an hour and a half at this point. There's no. And he looks at the contraction timer, and it's the 2 minutes apart, 1 minute long. So he's like, I'm going to call Abigail. So he calls my midwife, and you can hear her scrambling on the phone, throwing all her stuff together. And she comes flying in. By the time she got here, I was on the bed pushing and on my hands and knees. And I remember asking her, because she was like, yeah, your baby's coming. And I was like, does that mean I can turn off my contraction timer now? Which I don't know why I asked that, because she's like, yeah, just turn it off. So I did have the fetal ejection reflex with him, and he came out in 5 pushes. I had no control again of that. And actually, I expected again, head come out and then another contraction, body come out. And my midwife's like, you can grab your baby. He's here. And I'm like, really? Because I was waiting for my next contraction, and he was just there. And actually, my midwife assistant didn't even get there until he was born. But that one was just so crazy because it was only 3 hours long. And my body was so weak from how quickly everything happened that I couldn't even lift my baby up. And he was our biggest baby by far. So my body was just, I have little babies. My first was 5 pounds, 12 ounces. Second was 6 pounds, 6 ounces. So we were like, there's no way this kid goes past 7 pounds. Well, he was 7 pounds, 11 ounces. And so my body was tired. And I remember just sitting there, they helped me up on bed. I'm holding my baby. I'm like, what just happened? Because it was so fast. And I'm sure you understand, there's no mental prep when it comes to precipitous labor. You're just doing it. And it was so vastly different and such a wild ride compared to my other two, because, you go from 13 and a half hours to 3. It was just absolutely wild, but it was really, almost a free birth in some extent. And it was nice because I liked being able just to have my husband there. And again, my midwife didn't do anything. She's never had to help. Like, she's just been there to monitor and make sure everything is good, and that's been such a blessing. So, yeah, that one was just absolutely insane. I really didn't even think my husband was gonna get home in time with how quickly everything went. Thank God he did.
Yeah, no kidding. I honestly, yeah, that's why I always say too, with the two, whether you have long labors, really very, very fast labors, like they all have their own kind of hill that you kind of have to overcome
Yeah.
or mountain that you have to overcome. But
It's actually insane because, well, like I said, like, birth is such a mental game, and, like, keeping yourself calm. And I remember, because things were going so fast, like, at that point, I'm on my hands and knees, and I remember, like, vocalizing to myself, "Calm down, you're okay." Like, because it's so easy to, like, fall into that panic, and I think especially with the labor being so fast, like, I didn't even have a time to, like, recognize that I was in labor. Like, there was just, "You're doing this." And so I told my husband after, I'm like, if we have a fourth, like, I'm gonna pray for like 5, 6 hour labor. Like, I think that's a good time. Enough to process that I'm in labor, but like not too long that I'm like
yeah,
exhausted.
no, for sure. Trust me, I definitely agree with that. I even definitely for my next one, I am hoping that it is not as fast. Now,
Yeah.
it is cool to have a record with your midwife of the fastest delivery. And I'm a very competitive person. So I'm like honored to have that, but also I don't want it to be faster.
Let's not break that record.
Yeah, I'll keep that record with my son, and then with the next one, I will gladly let somebody else take that for the year because no, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. I don't
Yeah.
blame you one
I
bit.
liked it. Honestly, my experience was amazing, especially everything that we just kind of like went through. So, did your previous births, your first one and your second one, prepare you mentally, spiritually for such a fast, intense labor?
I would say so, yeah, because I knew my tendency to panic, like, when things were going fast, and, like, each birth was, had its fast parts, right? Like, there was, like I said, with each kid, there was no, like, really active labor. It was just early labor straight into you're having this baby. And so I think especially with my third, like, it was really helpful to know, one, I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. My body knows what I'm doing. But, like, reminding myself of that, but also, being able to, like I said, like, vocally walk myself through and just, like, keep myself calm. And same with my husband, like, just reminding me, like, "You were made to do this." And so I think each birth built on top of itself, Once you've done it once, like, it's almost, like, scary to do it again, but also, like, comforting in the same way because, yeah, you've been through it, but then also it can be so different. But I think especially with my third, like, it helped me to just remain calm and, like, to know, like, my body is just taking over and I just need to listen to it. Like, because I think to some extent with both my first and second, I really tried to fight my body here and there. And as much as I'd like to say that I, like, listened to my body the whole time, um, and so both of those really helped me to realize, like, I need to just really, really 100% let go. And I didn't, again, didn't really have a choice, like, because he was coming. But that helped me remain calm in the midst of that because I did have such a tendency to panic as things got crazy.
Yeah. No, for sure. And so, how do you feel that faith, mindset, and just trusting your body affect the way that women experience labor and birth?
Honestly, I think, at least for me, like, the faith mindset especially shaped all of it. And it's hard for me to understand how people are even able to go through life without God, if I'm being honest. But, like, especially in birth and labor and all the things, because it is so difficult and so taxing. And honestly, I feel like there's a bit of a negative mindset surrounding a lot of it. Like, not having the baby, but all the stuff that you have to go through. Um prior to that. And I think that, at least for me, and for a lot of people that I know, that having that faith and, like, trusting God's design for that really gave me and other people peace about, like, okay, the stuff I'm going through, this is just a season, but my baby's growing healthily. Like, yes, I'm throwing up a lot, but that means that I'm still pregnant and I still have this baby. Cause I forgot to mention, we did have another miscarriage in between my second and my third. And so I had, really with all pregnancies, but it was, like, renewed again with my third, that fear of, like, I'm going to lose this baby. And first off, my faith in that regard was like, okay, even if I do lose this baby, like, I know where they are and I know that they're being born into the arms of Jesus. And, like, what more could I ask for my kid? But then also having that faith of, okay, if I'm still feeling these symptoms, like, my baby's still there. So just that and like being informed in general, I think just gave me so much peace about, knowing all of it. And I'm one of those people where like I kind of have to know how things work. I want to understand like, your contractions, what are they actually doing? And like all those things. But I think the combination of like understanding the physiological aspect and understanding like what nutrition helped me and what like even things like crossing my legs could throw off the whole space that my baby has. And so stuff like that really helped me to understand like how intentionally designed we are for birth and for pregnancy. And so that just gave me so much more peace and confidence. And I don't like, yes, confidence in myself, but I wouldn't say like my ability, but like how God made me to do the thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree too. And so I kind of want to shift into talking about support because you have mentioned, your midwife being pretty hands off, but obviously supporting you well, and then your husband being your biggest support. So, what role did your husband play during your births that really just kept you grounded?
So he, from really with all of them, but I would say the biggest thing was just like the counter pressure, honestly, because I had a lot of back labor with my first. And he actually, God bless him, like did counter pressure for so long and so hard that he popped his shoulder out of place while
Shoot.
I was in labor. And he, was able to pop it back in. But like that was like seeing him being willing to stay up and do all those things, like, and be with me and like want to be a part of it was such a blessing. Cause like, unfortunately, you hear of a lot of dads that are kind of, hands off. And he was like super hands on, praying with me, just reminding me like that I was made to do this and making sure that I had water, making sure that I had snacks, and so he was just like, I mean, truly my rock, like, because he kept bringing me back to God and that was what I needed. And he did that all through my pregnancies, all through my postpartum. I mean, he has just been such a blessing in each and every stage because he really has like, he has the ability to shift me back and to make me focus on what I need to focus on because, I both in birth and life, like struggle with anxiety and struggle with all the things. And it's so easy for me to get clouded with, what could go wrong or what's going on currently and all the things. And so just with all of the labors, like his ability to bring me back and to center me and say like, listen, you know, this is tough. I can't even begin to understand what you're going through, but like God has made you to do this and I am here with you. And like just really continuously speaking life into me, into all of those. Like that was just the greatest gift.
Yeah. And I think that's amazing. I love when I just hear like husbands that are just being so supportive because who you marry matters. And, a lot of people don't think about birth too of like, okay, well, is this guy going to be able to support me during that? Like,
For real.
and because it's a big life-changing event and the oxytocin, you want that to naturally flow because that's what gets things up and moving anyways in birth. And, there's nothing better than just feeling loved and supported while you're bringing a human into the world too, of at least personally for me, that just really helped kickstart things just because I felt
Yeah,
so loved and supported. And so I
absolutely.
love that your husband was that for you. And I want to kind of jump more into your postpartum healing journey a little bit, just because I really don't feel like this topic is talked about a lot or enough. You're already in the trenches of no sleep. You're trying to figure out how to breastfeed sometimes or exclusively pumping like you were, and you're just in this funk that it's a lot of people view it as something you should just be able to snap out of.
Yeah.
And it's not like that at all. And so I would just like you to just kind of speak a little bit to maybe your postpartum depression, what that journey kind of looked like, and then how or what helped you heal emotionally or spiritually during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the postpartum depression basically the instant my son was born. Like you can even see in pictures just the disassociation, like I was not there. And we really struggled with nursing, which played into it a lot for me because, obviously, like I am a huge proponent for breastfeeding. I think if you can do it, do it. But also, I feel like there's such a stigma around other things, around exclusively pumping or around formula. And I felt that like I felt guilt from not giving my baby breast milk. But he had just a horrible latch and we were not at a place where we could afford like craniosacral therapy. And so a lot of it, I think, was made worse by the like guilt and stuff that I was putting on myself, because everybody around me was super supportive, but it's so hard when you see it on social media all the time and all the things. And so I decided to stop nursing him at 2 weeks postpartum because I just couldn't do it. Like I was getting to a point where I was resenting my baby and I didn't want to do that. He wasn't doing anything wrong. And so I did the exclusive pumping, which did definitely help take a mental load off. Exclusive pumping, tough, but like it's what I needed in that season. But so that whole first year, I mean, my husband and I have never done anything easily. We got married at 19. We've moved several times. He switched careers, and actually he started fire school the week after my son was born. So not only was I, dealing with newborn, but we're switching that. He's doing a different job. So that first year was a lot of me figuring out how to be a mom, him figuring out how to be a dad while also learning the new schooling. And then it was almost like the way that postpartum depression showed up for me was, I had a lot of anxiety about like blown out of proportion things. Like somebody's going to break in my house and steal my kid. Like just ridiculous stuff. And then I also had a lot of fear of being left alone with him. I didn't ever experience like a desire to hurt my child, but I know that that happens in postpartum depression. And I was scared of that even happening. So I was like, I'm going to put a wall around a wall and I want somebody with me at all times. And so for me, that whole first year, it was just like trying to survive. And it was really hard for me to even like put a name to my postpartum depression because I didn't want people to think that I was a bad mom. And like even down to I didn't tell my midwife. She had no idea because I was like covering it. So that was really tough. And I at the time couldn't afford counseling. So I was kind of just going through it. I will say that my mom and one of my good friends and my husband like definitely kept me afloat. But it was like on the other side of it, I want moms to know, like, while what you're feeling is not normal, like because of hormones and all those things, like that doesn't make you a bad mom. And like you should ask for help. And that's what I really struggled with in the first year. I didn't ask for help the way that I needed to. I was afraid to talk about it. I was afraid to like I said, be left alone with my baby. There were days where I just like couldn't get out of bed. And it was just really tough because it was like I knew deep down inside that I didn't want to be that way, but I couldn't make myself change. And like I said, I got pregnant with my second 4 months postpartum and I just prayed and prayed and prayed like, Lord, I need that redemptive experience because I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to miss out on my child's life again because, I can look at pictures and I can see the stuff that like we went through the first year, but I truly don't remember a lot of it. It's very repressed and that's like heartbreaking to me because I don't want to miss out on my child's life. So for me, there was, like I said, a lot of like miraculous healing, I will say. Like the Lord really did lift a lot of that off when I had my second. But to this day, I'm 4 months postpartum with my third. I still struggle with it a bit. I have days that are really, really great. And then I have days where I am just like deep down in a pit and I like feel crazy almost because I'm like, what did I do wrong? Because, I've had a really good day and now I can't. And so a lot of the healing for me has been putting a name to it. I think that a lot of women, like I said, are afraid to admit that they're going through it because, especially in a world of social media where you see everything painted so perfectly and everybody's finding all this joy in motherhood. It's like, what's wrong with me that I'm not enjoying my kids the way that I should? So being able to like put a name to it and speak to it, but also like not like blasting it, but like telling people about it. Because I think in the same way, like when we like struggle with sin and stuff and we like put a name to it, then that helps kind of release us from it because there's accountability. And so a lot of that for me was, learning how to express, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I need help, or this is where I'm at today. And I just want to let you know, like stuff like that. And so, 3 years deep into it, I am definitely not like where I want to be.
Yeah.
But things like I said, like putting a name to it, learning to ask for help, which is hard. It's really hard, but learning to ask for help and even down to like really being intentional about my nutrition and about my exercise, because I do think that that was one thing that really helped me in the transition from 1 to 2. Before I had my first, I wasn't very like, I didn't have to worry about what I ate or whatever. I just, ate fast food or it didn't matter to me. And so I think that that really did contribute into it because when I got pregnant with my second, I was really focusing on diet and all those things. And that did make a huge difference, so I think that there's a lot of factors that have contributed towards just me getting better. Um, and I would say to anybody listening that's going through it, like, it is a journey, and it's not something that's going to get better right away. But like there is light, like there is healing, and healing just sometimes takes time. And while I wish that I didn't go through it, I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to minister to other women who have, and to provide that hope for women who have gone through it, because it can feel like it's never going to end when you're in the midst of it. And like I said, like I still have my days that are tough, and I still have healing and growing to do. But looking back on like where I was 3 years ago versus now is just a huge difference. And, so I'm grateful that I'm able to share that testimony with people, because like you said, like it's so much more common than again, people talk about, but there's such a taboo around it because you don't want people to think that you're a bad mom because you don't want to be around your kid. And it's like, honestly, even the best moms have days where they just want to break, and that's okay, because like we were not made to run at 100% all the time. We are not made to carry the load all the time. I mean, whether I was a mom or not, like I was made for fellowship. God made me for fellowship. God made me for community. So if I can't do my life alone without children, then, what makes me think that I can do it with children? So just like an encouragement to those women, like reach out to people, ask for help, because honestly, like there's so many more people going through it than you realize. And having that community, while it is so hard to build sometimes, is so, so worth it.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that too.
Yeah.
I know that there's obviously like a stigma around it of, I think a lot of people don't want to share it because it almost kind of views as like weakness, or like what you said too of like, oh, I'm going to look like I'm a bad mom because I'm not all sunshine and rainbows. But motherhood is hard. And I literally always say that it is the hardest, most rewarding, most joy filled, most, I don't know, just every emotion you can think of, that's motherhood. And every single day is not joyous in the aspect of you love every aspect of every day. Because I mean, on the days where your kids are fighting and the dog decides to yak everywhere and like you gotta clean up all this stuff, and then a bill has to go out, or like something breaks and you have to fix it in your house, that's not really like the best day of motherhood. Obviously I still feel like you can find joy like in little things throughout the day, but when you're really struggling with that postpartum depression too, it can be really hard to just do that, because a lot of people are always like, oh, well, snap out of it, or, well, do something that makes you happy. Well, motherhood can still make you happy. Being a mom can still make you happy, but you might just not feel it right then and there. And those like intrusive thoughts, those things are buck wild, especially fresh postpartum too.
Absolutely.
Of like, you think of things that you're just like, what? Like
it is kind of insane, actually. And I think like something that's really helped me, especially this time around, because I had the prenatal depression so badly, was reminding myself, and, to anybody who's dealing with it, that like it's an illness, just like diabetes or something else. So if you are dealing with, I don't know why diabetes is the one that's going to my head, but if you were dealing with diabetes, you would go seek help. You would go seek medical care. You would go like get medication. Like the same thing is true for postpartum depression. Like it is okay to need help. It is okay even to take medication if you need it. Like, do I want to? No. But there are times where your body just needs that extra support. And I think that if we try and shift the mindset of like, it's not weakness, it's not anything you did wrong, it is actually truly an illness that needs treating, that like one that kind of takes the weight off of us for thinking that we did something to cause it, but also like encourages women to actually go get the help that they need, because you can heal from it, but you have to seek those resources.
Yeah. And sometimes too, I think that who you seek out for the help also makes all the difference too, because, obviously like your husband is a huge support person, but it can also be really hard for them to understand because they want to fix things. And I think that that's their natural, like they want to provide, they want to help, they want to fix and stuff. But sometimes you might need to find another mom who has walked through the same exact thing. Maybe it's a mom who is on the other side of it so that you can see like, okay, well, she walked through this and she's on the other side. Like, I just need someone to listen and obviously pour in some experience to me. Maybe that's praying with me. Maybe that's actually giving me resources, or maybe that's your midwife. Maybe it's a sister or a mom. But sometimes, like, I think that we always try to go to our most trusted people. And even though they don't mean to, like, maybe not be as helpful as what we need, they're just doing the best that they can. And sometimes you might have to seek help elsewhere too. And it's okay to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that. Really. I just think that it just needs to be talked about more because no mom should ever feel alone, especially with the weight of being fresh postpartum and just going through that. And postpartum depression can last for a while too. It's not just I'm 6 weeks, I'm good. Sometimes does that happen? Yes. Does that always happen? No.
Right.
And especially if you are breastfeeding for an extended amount of time too, just know that your hormones are pretty much out of whack the whole entire time. So if you are prone to that, maybe help yourself to prepare ahead of time too. Like if just have that person maybe already in the back of your mind that if I experience this postpartum depression, that's who I'm going to reach out to and I'm going to be proactive with it. I think that that's
Absolutely.
really, really important with all things birth and motherhood too in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I like to close every episode with one question, and that is, if you could speak one piece of empowering wisdom into the hearts of the mothers listening, what would it be?
Man, I read this question and I was like, Lord, I just need you to like speak through me in this. And so, gosh, I mean, really, I think that it comes down to like birth, pregnancy, postpartum, all of it, like ultimately is a breaking down and renewing of who you are. And I think that I would encourage that if you just give into that and you let God create you into the mom that you're supposed to be, that you will see so many blessings and so many miracles and all the things that you like may never have even expected. You know, you had talked earlier about like going from becoming a woman to like birthing yourself into motherhood. And, you know, so I would just encourage moms to like really like embrace that change, embrace that breaking down of who you are, because yes, like who you were before kids was probably wonderful, but like what God has for you on the other side, like is just that much better. Like you are doing kingdom work through your motherhood. You're doing kingdom work through your pregnancy and through your birth and through how you raise your kids. And when you just really like parent with God and let him do what he's doing, you know, you'll see such blessing and such return from that. So that would be my encouragement or my wisdom, you know, especially from someone who's been through all of the things, you know, from miscarriage to postpartum depression to postpartum anxiety. Like all of those things God has used for my good and God has used for my testimony to be able to give to other women. And he's going to do the same for those listening. Like he's got a plan for your birth. You just have to let him do it.
Yeah. No.
So.
Yeah, no, that is so good. Thank you so much for sharing. And
yeah, absolutely.
Katie, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on Her Birth, Her Story.
Thank you so much. It's been such a blessing to talk to you.
Thank you. I loved hearing Katie's 3 birth stories and just loved hearing her heart and her wisdom that she shared through her postpartum depression journey and just her passion for, you know, having faith, surrendering to God and doing your best to prepare, but also surrendering to God and just trusting him during your birth story. So Katie, thank you so much for sharing. If this story inspired you or encouraged you in any way, please share it with another mama who needs to hear it. And don't forget to like, rate, review the show. This helps us to get this podcast out to as many women as we possibly can. And as always, don't forget that this is your body, your baby, and your birth. We are reclaiming birth one story at a time.